In the city that doesn't sleep, dreams are made and wishes can come true. But not all dreams are good. In the 1960s and 70s, nightmares lurked in the bowels of New York City. Times Square was once a haven for individuals seeking a good time and an absolute hell for the working girls that provided it. Girls went missing, and eventually, the bodies started to pile up. The monster behind these heinous acts was eventually caught, but he could have been stopped so much sooner if the police had just connected the dots.
Welcome to Tales from the Graves, where shadows lurk and whispers echo.
Join us as we delve into the unknown, exploring tales of mystery, horror, and the supernatural.
Be prepared to journey into the darkness, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs.
I'm Jen.
And I'm Jess.
Together, we're the Grave Sisters, and we'll be your guides as we unearth the strange and unusual.
So find your flashlight, grab your shovel, and let's dig in.
The following podcast is rated for mature audiences.
It may contain graphic scenes of violence and explicit language that some may find disturbing.
Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to episode 11, Gravediggers. We want to welcome our listeners from Russia, Australia, and Brazil. We also keep getting new listeners from all around the U.S. It's banana bonkers that we're growing. I just want to thank each and every one of you for listening. Listening helps our podcast grow, and when we reach 1,000 listeners, we'll probably do a special live broadcast.
Ooh, that'd be so cool.
You'll get to hear all the intrusive thoughts that don't make the final cut, which is sadly a lot.
Yeah.
Enough housekeeping, on to the episode. Today, I'll be covering Richard Francis Cottingham, a piece of garbage known as the Torso Killer and the Times Square Ripper. If you haven't already, there is a Netflix documentary on him and about Times Square at the times that these killings took place. Which, you've been to New York.
Yes, a long time ago, but it was crazy. It's a really cool place to visit, but to live there, not for me. Not this Arkansas gal.
So, I'm going to do my best to try and not turn this into a two-parter, but there's so much information about the Times Square killer that it's just a lot of information to just digest and go through. I don't want to water down any of the details, but at the same time, this is your trigger warning. This guy's really messed up. He is super messed up, okay? Keep that in mind.
So, fucked up dude warning. Gotcha.
Yeah. All right, let's dig in. There's a lot of discussion regarding serial killers of nature versus nurture. Are they born this way, or did their life make them who they are? Cottingham was born in the Bronx in New York City in 1946. He was the first of 4 children, and when he was 2, his family moved them to Dumont, New Jersey. Then moved again in 1956 to Rivervale, New Jersey. It was in Rivervale that Cottingham started his fascination with bondage pornography.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I am a firm believer in most cases that porn doesn't make people who they are. Sometimes it doesn't help the other issues that they have going on, though, and those fantasies sometimes become obsessive. According to Cottingham, the whole idea of bondage had aroused and fascinated me since I was very young.
How does it start when you're young?
So, I guess when he was, a teenager, they moved to Rivervale, and that's when he started looking at the porn. He was only 10. But I guess at that age, they're starting to go through changes and...
Well, I mean, I get that, but dang.
Yeah. From all accounts of his early life, it seemed that it was marked by a turbulent family life. Though I've seen some conflicting accounts, both stating that his relationship with his parents was strained and that he was very close to his mother. Cottingham's father was frequently absent, which left him alone with his mother often. But supposedly, she exhibited signs of mental illness. I wasn't able to find out exactly what she may have had, but some believe his treatment as a child led to Cottingham's development of both emotional and psychological disturbances.
I mean, that definitely does have an effect. I know that some researchers have stated that, along with the nature versus nurture, how you bring a child up, how you discipline them, how you speak to them, definitely has a large impact on the way that they grow up.
You see, his actions and behavior, that I'll detail later, align with traits commonly associated with psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder, ASPD. Psychopathy is characterized by a lack of empathy, manipulation, and almost complete disregard for what we consider social norms. Now, those with ASPD often exhibit patterns of behavior like being impulsive, lots of deceit, so there's lots of lying, whether it's big or small, and a complete disregard for the rights of others. He was diagnosed with these based on his crimes, which exhibit sadistic acts of torture and dismemberment, and show that he had no empathy whatsoever and a callous disregard for human life. After he graduated in 1964, he got a job working for MetLife, an insurance company. I suspect nepotism, though, because his father was the vice president. He started in the mailroom at the Manhattan headquarters and then eventually became a mainframe computer operator after he had completed courses. So he was kind of a nepo baby, but maybe not. He didn't work for MetLife too long, though. In October of 1966, he became a computer operator for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. His time at Blue Cross is actually pretty interesting because he worked in the same office as Rodney Alcala. So Rodney was a fugitive child molester and serial killer in his own right. Rodney went by the alias of John Berger when he worked for Blue Cross, and both Cottingham and him state that they never knew each other, and there was no evidence that points to them being familiar with each other before they were both arrested. For those of you wondering, Rodney Alcala is the dating game killer. Just as we've seen other notorious serial killers do before, Cottingham got married on May 3rd of 1970. The couple had 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. 8 years later, in April of 1978, Cottingham's wife filed for divorce on the grounds of abandonment and mental cruelty. Why those specific things? Well, while I couldn't find evidence of any physical abuse, Cottingham refused to have relations with his wife after she gave birth to their 3rd child. He would also stay out until early morning and basically left her with little to no money for household things like, food, or maybe, bills to keep the house afloat.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, but I have 3 kids, and it's freaking expensive. Kids are not cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I know the prices and everything are vastly different from what 60s and 70s were, but still, they're still super expensive.
Especially groceries.
Yeah. Now, she did withdraw the divorce petition when he was arrested in May of 1980. We don't know why, but then completed the divorce in 1981 once he was convicted. Now, in the teaser, I mentioned that there was a line of dots which should have put Cottingham on the police's radar for these bodies popping up. But in 1969, when he was convicted of drunk driving, the police didn't know they had a serial killer running amok in New York, let alone that it was this guy. Cottingham paid his little fine and seemed to keep his nose clean for a few years. And when, in August of 1972, he was charged and convicted of shoplifting at Stern's department store in Paramus, New Jersey, he got the option to either pay another $50 fine or do 10 days in jail. He paid the fine.
Oh, so he had money for a fine, but not money for his kids? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're dealing with a walking piece of human garbage. So. Another charge happened on May 12th of 1974 when he was arrested for robbery and unlawful imprisonment. The one pressing charges was a sex worker. She was a working girl, a prostitute, as they were called, or I don't know, maybe still called, I don't know. She didn't show up to court, though, so the charges were dropped.
Ooh, he got lucky on that one.
Yeah, well, it was actually the girl and her pimp who were pressing charges. And, I mean, if you have to get the pimp involved, that's like holy crap-olies, right?
Yeah, Gator gonna get him money.
Oh my God. Back then, it was sex workers did not have a great relationship with police. They just didn't.
I mean, they still don't now, but...
Yeah. So they pressed the charges initially, but when it came to actually showing up to court, they could have also been sentenced for solicitation and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So they just didn't show. He was never charged, he was never convicted, and it never went on his record.
That's where it kind of...
Yep, that's kind of where the ball was dropped.
Yeah.
Now we got a little bit of history on Cottingham. He's troubled, seems to only get married to have kids and act like a normal family man, was obsessed with bondage porn, and from one of the complaints against him, he started acting on those desires.
Ooh la la.
Yeah. I'm going to try and discuss his victims in chronological order, but Cottingham himself claims that he started killing as an adolescent and that he's killed as many as 100 victims.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. I think at the time when they first convicted him, they got him for 5 counts, which was then later upped to 9 and then 11. And as we're going to see throughout, I had to piece this shit together, man, because he started confessing to things in 2022 as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. From what I could tell by looking at things and not knowing any of the adolescent killings that he claims to have done, because he's never actually given names or locations or anything, his spree began in 1967. Mary Ann Della Sala, 17, seemed to vanish at the end of her shift on January 24th of 1967. She worked at the ShopRite in Hackensack, New Jersey. Her body was found 3 months later on April 20th in the Passaic River in Hawthorne, New Jersey. Cause of death was strangulation, and she showed no signs of sexual assault.
Okay.
On October 30th, 1967, Nancy Vogel, a 29-year-old married woman and mother of 2, was found dead in her car. She was bound and was naked in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey. She had last been seen just 3 days earlier in Little Ferry when she went to go play bingo with friends at a local church. Nancy chose to do her shopping instead, and she was kidnapped at the mall in Bergen County. He took her to the field in Montvale, where he strangled her to death. Cottingham was convicted of the murder on August 25th of 2010. It wasn't until 2022 that Cottingham was arraigned from his hospital bed for the murder of Diane Martin Cusick, 23. She was a Long Island dance teacher. Her body was found on February 16, 1968, in the back seat of her 1961 Plymouth Valiant. Outside the Green Acres Mall in Valley Stream, New York. She had adhesive tape around her mouth and neck. Diane had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled. Diane put up a fight. Her hands had defensive wounds on them, and it was the DNA from specimens discovered at the crime scene that helped convict Cottingham. Police believe that he frequented the drive-in theater at the Green Acres Mall and may have pretended to be a mall security guard to approach Diane. So there's that, lying and manipulation coming into play. Cottingham has already escalated to how he treated his victims. His next known victim was Jacqueline Leah Jackie Harp. She went by Jackie.
Okay.
She was only 13 when she vanished on July 17th of 1968 in Midland Park, New Jersey. She never made it home from school band practice. Her body was found the next day at Goffle Brook, which I think is a stream. Goffle, Goffle Brook.
Okay. I don't think I've ever heard about that, but okay.
Jackie had been beaten about the face and had been strangled with a leather strap from her flag sling. Police believe the assault was sexually motivated, despite the fact that Jackie didn't show any signs of sexual assault. The reason for this thinking is that her clothes were in quote-unquote disarray. Cottingham himself claimed that he attempted to persuade Jackie to climb into his car. When she resisted, he drove his car in front of her, stopped, walked over to her, and despite her attempts to flee, he dragged her to a cluster of bushes and murdered her. Irene Blaze, only 19, was reported missing on April 7th of 1969. She was found the next day, face down, in 4 feet of water in Saddle River, New Jersey. Irene had been strangled with the chain of her crucifix she was wearing. Cottingham also confessed to her murder. He stated that he saw her shopping in Hackensack and convinced her to join him for a drink. The two took a cab to a second location, and the two supposedly spent some time together, after which he offered to take Irene back to the bus station. But instead, he drove to a remote location, against her will, where he sexually assaulted and then murdered her. Denise Faleska, 15.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a 13-year-old, we've had a 15-year-old, a 16, a 17, he
likes him young.
So Denise was 15. She left her home in Gloucester, New Jersey on July 13th, 1969 at 8 p.m. to meet some friends. She was supposed to come home at 11 that night, but she never made it home. There were witnesses that claimed to see Denise around 9 p.m. heading along Old Hook Road in Emerson toward Westwood. On July 14th, Denise was found on the side of Westminster Place in Saddlebrook, New Jersey. Cottingham has also confessed to this murder. He states she was walking down the side of the road in Emerson when he pulled up and offered her a ride. He drove them to a parking lot of his old school where he forced Denise to perform oral sex on him. He was apparently very dissatisfied with how inexperienced she was and murdered her.
It was a teenager. What do you expect?
I don't know, bro. Ugh. On March 1st of 1970, a group of hikers came across a young woman's naked body in the woods near Tweed Boulevard in South Nyack, New York. The victim would be identified as Lorraine Montalvo McGraw, 26. She had lived in Long Island and had been missing since February 27th of 1970. Lorraine had a rap sheet for drugs and prostitution offenses, many of which were listed under fake names. She had worked for a number of adult establishments in and around Times Square. This was another murder that Cunningham has finally confessed to.
Well, at least she's of age, but ugh.
Mm-hmm. On May 10th of 1972, the body of Mary Beth Hines, 21, was discovered near a creek in Rockville Center, New York. She had cuts on her face and neck from being strangled. Mary suffered from grand mal seizures and had been diagnosed with epilepsy. She had vanished when, on May 5th, she boarded a bus to travel to the nearby dance. Cunningham claims to have thrown her body from the Rockville Center Peninsula Boulevard Bridge. Laverne Moy, 23, was discovered in Rockville Center Creek on July 20th, 1972. She, too, had been murdered by strangulation. Cunningham claims that he threw her body off the same bridge that he had thrown Mary Beth Hines' body. Sheila Hyman, 33, was found bludgeoned and stabbed to death in her home in North Woodmere, New York, on July 20th, 1973. Her husband found her after returning from a trip to the department store. Sheila was found dead in the master bathroom. No other rooms outside the bathroom showed signs of a struggle, and no neighbors reported hearing anything unusual, like strange noises, from around the time of her death. Maria Amareta Rosado Neves, 18, was found dead in Wantagh, New York, on December 27th of 1973. She was found strangled to death in a weeded area close to a bus stop on Ocean Parkway. She had been discovered by park maintenance. Unlike Cunningham's other victims, Maria was found wrapped in a gray blanket and covered in plastic bags.
Sounds like you changed it up just a little bit with the bags.
It's going to get more gruesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
August 9th, 1974, Lorraine Marie Kelly, 16, and Mary Ann Pryor, 17, left North Bergen, New Jersey, with plans to go shopping in the Garden State Plaza in Paramus, New Jersey. Lorraine's boyfriend dropped the two off at a bus stop on Broad Street in Ridgefield, New Jersey. They apparently intended to hitchhike from there. A few days later, on August 14th, their bodies were found in a wooded location close to the Ridgemont Gardens complex in Montvale, New Jersey. Don't hitchhike.
Yes, my mind. How was hitchhiking such a big thing back then?
I don't know. Lorraine and Mary were naked, bound to each other at the wrists and ankles, laying face down next to each other. Both girls had been beaten and sexually assaulted. The ligature marks on their necks point to them both being strangled as well. Lorraine and Mary seemed to have been tortured. They both had cigarette burns on their flesh. It was on April 27th of 2021 that Cunningham was convicted of both murders. In court, he admitted to kidnapping them, tying them up, and assaulting them both in a motel room, and then states he drowned them in the bathtub. On October 7th of 1974, Lisa Thomas, 15, left her home to go to Nanut Mall. Her body was found about 700 feet from her home. Lisa's body was found by her father on the morning of October 8th. Lisa was blindfolded with a crimson rag from her own purse, and her head had been bashed in. Though Cunningham has confessed to her murder, the investigation into her murder is still ongoing because the police did not agree with or take Cunningham's statements regarding this murder seriously. On December 16th of 1977, the body of Mary Ann Marzie Carr was found between a parked van and a chain-link fence in Little Ferry, New Jersey. She was still wearing her white nurse's uniform, but her shoes were missing. She was last seen on December 15th in the parking lot of the Ledgewood Terrace Apartments, where Cottingham and his wife had previously lived. Cottingham kidnapped her from the complex and took her to the Quality Inn in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey. Once there, he beat, bit, slashed, and sexually assaulted her. Mary Ann was killed by strangulation. Cottingham then dumped her body in the parking lot of the Quality Inn. Mary Ann's body exhibited handcuff-related bruises on her wrists, ankles, as well as there was adhesive tape residue on her mouth. In 1978, on March 22nd to 23rd, in New York City, Karen Schilt, 22, was sexually assaulted and left for dead in a sewer. She did survive, however. Then, on October 10th, in Hackensack, New Jersey, Susan Geiger, 19, was sexually assaulted, and Cottingham attempted to murder her but was unsuccessful. She was pregnant at the time. The murders that resulted in Cottingham being referred to as the torso killer occurred on December 1st to 2nd of 1979. In New York, at the Travel Lodge Motor Inn, Dita Godzari, 22, and a still unidentified victim referred to as Manhattan Jane Doe, aged around 16 to 22, were found. They had been sexually assaulted, tortured, eventually fatally strangled. Their bodies had their heads and hands cut off post-mortem and were burned. Supposedly, when the firefighters came, they initially thought that they were saving people who were still alive, but quickly found out they weren't when a firefighter went to attempt to give mouth to mouth, and there was no head. A later autopsy revealed that both women had been tortured and assaulted while still alive for several days before being murdered. It was in 2009 when Cottingham admitted to these murders and claimed that he had severed the heads and hands of the victims to prevent their identification, as he had been acquainted with Dita and had been seen with her in a bar the night before. Valerie Ann Street, 19, was found in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey, at the same Quality Inn where Cottingham had dumped Mary Ann Carr's body. On May 5th, 1979, she had been bit and cut on her breasts, beaten and fatally strangled. Cottingham checked in using an alias. He killed her and stuffed her body under the bed for housekeeping to find. Investigators discovered Valerie handcuffed with 2 ligature marks on her throat. They determined that she had also been gagged with the white adhesive tape. The bites were all over her body and even her head. One fingerprint that belonged to Cottingham was recovered from a ratchet mechanism of the handcuffs left behind on Valerie. On May 12th, in Teaneck, New Jersey, Pamela Weisenfield was bit repeatedly and beaten, but she escaped the fate Cottingham's other victims suffered. On May 15th, 1979, Mary Ann Jean Reiner, sometimes referred to as Jean Reiner or Ann Reiner, was discovered at the Seville Hotel in New York. Her throat had been cut and her breasts had been removed post-mortem. Cottingham had left the breasts on the headboard of the bed. Just like with Dita and Jane Doe's murders, Mary Ann's body had also been set on fire in the same attempt to get rid of evidence. It was on May 22nd of 1980 in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey, that Leslie Ann Odell, 18, was solicited for sex. Cottingham took her to the same Quality Inn motel in Hasbrook Heights that he had taken Valerie. It was while he was torturing Leslie that security staff heard the screams and called the police. During my research, it looks like a housekeeper had heard the screams and went to check on the room because, they had freaking found a body previously. He's just using the same place. He's giving different aliases when he checks in because apparently back then they're like, oh, you want to have a little nookie? That's fine. So, she heard the screams. She went to go check. And for whatever reason, Cottingham allowed Leslie to answer the door.
What?
So I'm going to go into more about what he would do to torture girls and the things he would do and things of that nature. At this point, he had been on a killing spree from at least 1967 to now 1980.
He's just playing fast and loose.
Yeah, he thinks he's untouchable. Well, he allowed her to answer the door, and even though he was holding up a quote-unquote gun to Leslie, she was able to make some kind of hand gesture or hand motion to the housekeeper to basically say, hey, I'm in grave danger.
I'm in danger.
Pretty much. Well, after doing that, checking on them, the housekeeper told her head of staff or whatever, and they called the police. Cottingham tried to run, but he was caught and arrested.
About damn time.
Right? Among his possessions that were on him, like either in his car or in his little go bag, because serial killers like to have go bags. I'll go into that kind of crap when we cover, I guess, other serial killers like Ted Bundy or John Wayne Gacy, the Green River Killer, those types of pieces of human feces. But among his possessions, they found handcuffs, an open roll of duct tape, leather S&M gear, a toy gun, so it wasn't a real gun, a knife, and the drug he had used to incapacitate his victims. It was the date rape drug before Rohypnol became the more used date rape drug.
Okay.
During interrogation, Cottingham claimed to have paid Leslie $180 for sex and that everything he did to her had been consensual. Further investigation connected him to more crimes. His fingerprint was found on the pair of handcuffs found on Valerie Ann Street's crime scene, so there's one. When the police searched his home, they found mountains of evidence linking him to other murders, such as the key to Mary Ann Carr's apartment, a toy koala bear, and a pair of earrings that had belonged to Valerie Ann Street, the jewelry belonging to Dita Gudziri and Ann Reiner. His handwriting also linked him to the hotel or motel rooms he had rented and committed the killings inside. The following year, Cottingham was found guilty of 15 of the 20 counts of which he was charged. Now, not all of those were murder, obviously. Over the next 3 years, he was put on trial for his additional murders and attempted murders. During the proceedings, he attempted suicide twice. In total, he was convicted of 5 murders at the time and sentenced to hundreds of years in prison.
Damn straight.
A sentence that he is still serving. In 2020, he confessed to 3 more murders. Now, among his known torture methods were severely biting and scratching their nipples, cutting around the breasts, and threatening them with a toy gun. Now, they didn't know that it was a toy gun. They assumed that it was real. It looked real, the way he was waving it around, I guess, because I know now you can get real weight guns for like target practice or, their laser guns, but he would leave it within their reach so they could try to grab it, only to discover that it was fake. So, lots of psychological torture. He would also make his victims call him master. He took the trophies, such as jewelry and other personal belongings, and I guess he kept it at his house because that was a big link between a lot of murders to get him convicted.
You shouldn't have kept trophies. That is, ugh.
Girl, how about we not talk about what a smart serial killer should do, okay? Maybe let's not talk about that. Now, this has been kind of a wild ride. And we've really only focused on his victims and just kind of going through the laundry list of who died, when they died, and how they died. This doesn't go into detail about the terror that gripped New York City and especially Times Square.
Yeah, because he is called the Times Square Ripper, right? And most of it's Quality Inn, so...
So what happened was Times Square during this period of time in New York was not an area you wanted to be caught in. If you had to go to Times Square for anything, you needed to take protection. It was Times Square that we know today, fabulous, great Broadway shows, tons of entertainment, tons of things, tons of dining. Back in the 60s and 70s, though, there were strip clubs and little porn houses where you would walk into a room and you would slip money to the girl on the other side and she would lift the curtain or whatever, and you would get to watch her dance and strip and things of that nature. There were a bunch of those, and there were just sex workers, prostitutes everywhere in Times Square.
I mean, New York used to be New Amsterdam, so...
Yeah. Back in the 1960s, it was almost lawless. You had pimps, you had bookies, you had these guys who were trafficking young women.
And mafiosos and...
Not really mafiosos,
No?
not at that time.
Okay.
No, huh? I mean, they were around, probably, but they didn't quite dabble in the sex trade.
Okay.
But with the Netflix documentary that I watched, there was an actual survivor who she told the story, her life story of, escaping from her family because they were, it's abusive or whatever, and running away, and her pimp found her and kind of strung her out, because that's how they did things back then. They would string you out on drugs, get you hooked, and get you under their control where they're providing it, they're doing what they need to do to keep you working and things of that nature. So a lot of it was just these prostitutes were going missing, and they were considered undesirables.
Yeah, okay.
I think we see a lot of cases where the main target is sex workers. It's runaways. It's people that are homeless who are strung out on drugs or anything like that, because they are
People who won't be quote-unquote missed.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So Cottingham worked just down the road from Times Square. he would clock in and he would leave. And for a lot of these cases, he wasn't initially considered because his timesheet showed that he was clocked in and working during the murders or during the assaults that took place against these sex workers. And what upstanding citizen is going to do these things? We're going to take their word against an undesirable, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And it didn't help that these pimps and, sex workers would not show up to court to finish filing their case, afraid of repercussions against them for what they're doing.
Got it.
A lot of these women, besides the ones that were, like a nurse or an x-ray technician, a mom, the ones that he just found randomly, a lot of his victims were sex workers from Times Square. He would go, he would pick out a girl, and then he would take them across the state line back to New Jersey. And that's where a lot of the bodies were found. That's why you kept hearing New Jersey, New Jersey, New Jersey. So on Times Square, the working girls knew that they were not safe. But it's either do your thing, go and get a John and get paid, or be beat to death or within an inch of your life by your pimp. So Cottingham is referred to as the torso killer or the Times Square Ripper because that's where his favorite victim pool was. And the two more gruesome attacks happened in the Times Square area where he murdered them, decapitated them, and burned them. Whatever's the bigger publication, that's where you're going to get your little nickname like he got. So that's why he's called the Times Square Ripper. If you look up pictures of him today, you would be surprised because he doesn't look like a literal piece of human garbage. He resembles more closely Father Christmas. He's got white curly hair, rosy cheeks, a white beard and mustache, and he doesn't look like he's that bad of a guy, but if you sit down and you talk to him, he has no remorse over what he did. He doesn't care. There's a woman who goes and sees him, and she's not really fond of spending time with him. He seems to really enjoy spending time with her, though. She is possibly his daughter as a result from one of his assaults that he did not succeed in killing her. Oh, did you just look up a picture of him?
Yes, I did.
Right?
She told me about him, and I grabbed my phone and looked him up, and he looks like freaking Santa Claus.
He does. He does.
He's adorable in this picture. What the fudge?
Look up his mugshot when he was arrested. He looks real greasy there. So he looks a little creep. Like, not even bad, though. By 1970 standards, that's not bad.
No, that is not bad. But, ugh. I just think about Santa Claus, man.
Yep. Anyway, this woman who goes and sees him is basically trying to get more confessions out of him. He had reached kind of an agreement with prosecutors that I think he has to do every time he confesses to something. He's confessed to a few murders that he has not been prosecuted for because of that clause. He said that he would give this information free and willingly as long as he did not face prosecution. So he has been able to close a few cold cases. They can't extend his life so he can work out all those life sentences he's already got. He's never going to get out.
Yeah.
But it is nice that he's closing those cases. But there's still so many more victims out there that we don't know about. Again, he has claimed that he has murdered 100 women. And
Goodness.
so that leads us to be like, oh, I'm sorry, did you have 80 perfect murders? Because we know in today's standard, there is never going to be a perfect murder.
No.
There's always going to be evidence. For 3 years after he was convicted, he just kept claiming his innocence, saying that he was being framed, and then finally he just gave in. And he was like, yeah, I did it.
Acceptance. It's one of the 12 steps. He just finally accepted it, and he was like, okay, I did it, and here's a couple more.
He ain't gonna get any deader if he just comes clean. But
So you said he's still alive today, right?
he is. He is still
Okay.
alive. He is serving out his sentence in New Jersey because that's the first court that tried him.
Okay.
And that's where a majority of the murders were. If he ever gets done with his 6 or 7 consecutive life sentences in New Jersey, then he has to go to New York and serve 2 to 3 life sentences there. So I don't think it's ever,
Yeah, no. He's there until he's in the ground.
Yeah. Horrible person. Well, that's all I really have on the Times Square Ripper, the torso killer. Piece of garbage. I guess that's it. We're laying this one to rest for now. Send us an email, follow us, do all that stuff. Like, rate, and review on your preferred podcast listening platform because it just helps us grow. It helps us reach more listeners. We're really weird and weird. I don't know what a better word is to say about that,
And tell everybody that you know about us, please.
Yeah, just do what you can. Follow us. Find us in the graveyard on Discord. Link is in the description on our Podbean, as well as probably this episode or any of the apps in our About Me. Promise, we're not awful. I mean,
We'll talk to you later, Gravediggers. Love ya.
bye. See you in the next one. And we're gonna do a special thing for Friday the 13th. I'm not gonna give out any spoilers yet, but be on the lookout for a double episode that week.
If you like what you heard, please feel free to follow, like, rate, and review Tales from the Graves podcast on your preferred listening platform. We also would like to know what you think and what topic you suggest we unearth next. Email us at talesfromthegravespod@gmail.com or reach out to us at Tales from the Graves podcast on Instagram. And if you have Discord, join us in the graveyard. The link is in our bio on our Instagram as well as this listening platform. Thanks again, Gravediggers.